afternoon and welcome back to this week's episode of Since I Was Young, a podcast dedicated to all things Heart of Midlothian. This week we will be diving into events that took place at Tynecastle over the weekend just gone there, where Hearts somehow managed to draw 3-3 with Motherwell. From the jaws of defeat we snatched a draw. We'll be kind of touching on that and diving into our thoughts on the game itself as we go along. Before we get started, folks, as ever, I say every week, our social media links can be found in the description down below. Please feel free to head across and check us out across the social channels. We're trying our best to kind of interact and do as much as we can on those channels because, as I always say, you drive the content that we put out. So what you want us to talk about, we'll talk about. Please do get in touch with us if there's anything specific that you want us to touch on in future episodes, and we'll do our best to do so. Whilst you're down there as well, why not leave a comment on the YouTube page as well? Drop a wee comment on this week's video. Let us know your thoughts on the Motherwell tie and what side of the fence are you sitting on, which I'll sort of dive into as we go along. But yeah, without further ado, John, have you caught your breath after that at the weekend there?
Just about, yeah. I think I had wasted most of it in the first hour, screaming and bawling in frustration. We didn't really show up for most of the game at the weekend. We did manage to salvage a point from it. I struggled to see it as anything other than 2 points pissed away, unfortunately. We should, under no circumstances, be 3-0 down at home to a team like Motherwell. To their credit, Motherwell played very well. They took advantage of the chances that they had. For that first 60 minutes, they were very much deserving of the lead. We gave them far too much space, but we'll get into that when we talk about the goals.
Definitely.
I think now Motherwell have gotten a taste of what it felt like to be us all of last year. They royally pissed that away. Like if I'm a Motherwell fan, I'm probably 10 or 100 times more outraged by that result than any Hearts fan really should be.
Yeah, and I think it's probably the best place to start, where you kind of talk about the shape and the team selection. I think it's probably where we usually begin these sorts of conversations. Derek McInnes has used a few systems in the opening weeks of the season, and a few personnel as well, obviously due to the sheer number of new additions that we have. He's obviously still trying to figure out what works, I think, still trying to figure out what the most effective combinations are, and we'll kind of give our thoughts on that as we go along. But he began the game against Motherwell with 4-4-2, which is a system and a shape that both you and I enjoy. I think it's just that old school 4-4-2 version, with the wingers and the direct play, but there's something just not quite right with it at the moment and how we want to use it, and I think we'll touch on that as we go along. But essentially the 4-4-2 was played Pierre-Landry Kabore playing on the right hand side of the midfield four, with Shankland and James Wilson the forward line. Alan Forrest deployed on the left hand side of midfield, with Devlin and McKenty across the midfield. In defence we had Harry Milne, Stuart Finlay, Craig Halkett and Michael Steinvender, the right back, with Xander Clark in goal. A few things to sort of highlight from the team selection. Obviously, I'll start with the goalkeeper situation. Obviously, during the week, we've seen Liam McFarlane return from his loan at Alloa, where he was apparently doing rather well, due to a long-term injury that was suffered by Ryan Fulton. Don't know the extent of the injury. I've just heard it's long-term, so that's not ideal, which would obviously explain why McFarlane's been brought back to challenge Harry Stone and Xander Clark for starts. How much of a challenge to young goalkeepers are going to give to Xander Clark, I'm not entirely sure, but Derek McInnes has obviously spoken about the goalkeeping situation, and I think the words were something along the lines of monitoring the goalkeeping market. So that could be something we might do as this transfer window draws to a close, or alternatively Xander Clark might be the guy, and you can have your thoughts on that. And I'm sure many people have their thoughts on Xander Clark. I've kind of expressed my thoughts on Xander Clark a lot recently. I think he's far from the worst goalkeeper we've ever had, but I think he comes across very much to me as a confidence goalkeeper, and I think he wants to bounce back. Obviously, he had disappointments in previous games against Dundee United. Could he have done better for some of the goals against Motherwell? I don't really think so, but yeah, it's I think a position, particularly in goal, and obviously you'll know, you're probably the best person to speak about it, because I think it is a big confidence position. But you're also relying on those in front of you to help you, which I don't think he got a lot of help in certain points of the Motherwell game. The other option, the other team selection to mention, it's that right-hand side, the right-hand side of the pitch, with Michael Steinvender continuing at right back and Pierre-Landry Kabori deployed at right midfield. Now I'll start with Kabori because I'll keep it brief. He looked very much like a player in the wrong place. This is a man that scored 22 goals in 20 games in his previous club in a season, playing as a centre forward. We play him right midfield. I like the look of him, but I don't think he's got the industry to be that right midfielder for us. I think he can probably a right wing option, and you'll kind of probably get what I mean a bit more on that. Play him further forward, and he might do all right, but I don't think he's got the whole package to be that right midfielder, because especially with the sort of fragility of our right back situation at the moment, the right midfielder needs to be able to get back and help, needs to be able to cover, needs to have defensive responsibilities in as much as going forward. And I don't know whether Kabori's built for that. He's very much a centre forward to me that's being put there for whatever reason. Michael Steinvender, obviously, at right back as well. I like Michael Steinvender. I've said it before. I think there's definitely a talent in there, and certainly comes across as the sort of player that we could flip for a decent profit, if not big money. But he certainly has value in him. He's not a right back. He's doing a job. I have my thoughts on Adam Forrester, and I've been in this podcast. I'm not going to kind of dive too much into it, but in the same situation as we've had with McFarlane, we had sent Adam Forrester to Johnston from the cooperative loan. He lasted a week and then was recalled to play the bounce game against County. I just understand that. And I know people are critical of Adam Forrester, and the fact that Derek McInnes isn't using him would suggest Derek McInnes doesn't really think he's the answer either. But surely a natural right back has some place in a team that is lacking a right back. That to me is the biggest issue. It still remains an issue at the moment. But that kind of gives the selection thoughts from my end. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, or anything that I've maybe missed that you want to bring in?
It's not going to shock anyone, Alan, but I broadly agree with what you've laid out there. Certainly, Kabori, I think if you were deploying it as more of a front four with more attacking midfielders on the wide areas, that is maybe somewhere he could potentially work out. Personally, I think if anything, we should have had Wilson on the left, Kabori up front in the middle with Shankland, and maybe Forrest on the right-hand side in this situation. I do think the team selection was largely, we got it wrong. I do think that Adam Forrester, who is he's a developing player, he's not the complete article yet, but he's a natural right back. He was more than serviceable last year. He played games in Europe last year. I don't see why he, even at a young age, and even without being the finished article, I don't know why he's not the obvious choice over Steinvender at right back, who is not a right back. He can play there in an emergency. But if you've got Adam Forrester available above him, it's not an emergency situation. It's not a situation where you need to do that. I just feel like we need to stop messing around with the team selection and pick the best 11 players that are available. And the best 11 isn't your best 11. It's the best player in each of the 11 positions. The best player at right back that we have at the moment is Adam Forrester. Stop dicking around and play him there. That would be my thoughts on it. I do think that's why you can't have a Kabori or anyone else that's deployed on the right-hand side move with that kind of freedom going forward, because we always have to have one eye in the back of our head looking at right back, because that has been a problem area for us for a couple of years, basically since Michael Smith left the club. It's been a hole that we've had to fill, and we have as yet failed to do so.
Yeah, definitely. And I think obviously it all stems from the fact that Christian Borkovic, who was signed as the first choice right back, has got an injury that'll keep him out for a good few weeks yet. So that there's definitely an issue at right back, and I think it's such a glaring issue that opposition teams are targeting that, and they're aware of that, because if they do their homework, which is not difficult to do on us at the moment, they'll see that as an area and they'll go, right, well, that's where we'll hit them. And Motherwell, to be fair, did that as well, as have other teams at the start of the season. But you made an interesting point there about the best 11, and I kind of touched on it as well. And I don't think Derek McInnes yet knows his best 11. I think he knows a few players that he feels he can trust to do the jobs he wants them to do. I think you would put Stuart Finlay in that category because obviously Derek McInnes was so vocal about wanting to bring him in, and I think his impact he's had so far, not even just with his goals from set pieces, but just his general demeanour and his general character seems to have kind of made him a bit of a favourite for the manager early on. He's been praising Cammy Devlin for his work rate and his energy, and Cammy, you know what you get from Cammy, and I think McInnes has certainly warmed to that. But like you said there, your best starting 11, and I listened to the Heart Standard stuff after the game, and they spoke about it. They said, a lot of fans are coming out and saying in the aftermath of the game, and I know I've kind of skipped ahead a little bit before we've even spoken about the game, but people are saying, why doesn't Derek McInnes just pick his best 11? Why doesn't he just pick the best 11 players where they should play? You and I could sit down and make a starting 11 for Hearts, and it would be different. We could ask Ewan his starting 11 for Hearts or his strongest starting 11 for Hearts, and it would be different. You could cast the net even wider than that. Ask multiple Hearts fans, what's your best starting 11? What's your preferred system? Who would you play? You're not going to find a consistent selection because we've got so many options, and I think Derek McInnes will probably be feeling the same right now. He knows how he wants his Hearts team to play, but shapes and systems, that's fluid at the moment. And I think once he gets something nailed in and says, right, this is the shape that we're going with to go forward with, then we might start to see some shoots of things, because it is frustrating. But listen, it is what it is. And every week, when the team news is announced, you always get the occasional, why is so and so not starting? Why are they not on the bench? Why are they on the bench? Why are they in the team? Does Alan Forrest have some dirt over Derek McInnes? Why does he keep playing him, etc., etc.? These are always things that happen, and I think the main sort of shout that I saw from the Motherwell game was, why is Claudio Braga on the bench? This is a guy that so far has impressed hugely, and yet he's on the bench. Is he an impact player? Well, we'll talk about that because he certainly made an impact on the day. But I think you mentioned James Wilson, and I won't stay too much on this, but James Wilson for me is a very, very raw product, a very raw prospect, and certainly someone that we can develop and progress with. But I think we need to know what his blueprint is as a striker for Hearts. I think that's McInnes often says about him. We're using him to stretch defences. We're using him to disrupt defences. I don't see that in him. I saw it in Claudio Braga in the last half an hour, but I didn't see it in James Wilson, and I haven't for quite a while. So, that's my 2 cents on that. But in terms of, we'll jump into the actual game because I feel like I've talked quite a lot there. People that have listened to this and watched this episode or watched this podcast for a long time will know my feelings on Motherwell. I want to put it out there right from the start. It's not the team. It's not the manager. It's not even the players at Motherwell. I'll just leave it at that. There's a certain section of Motherwell that, say, fan base that, I have some previous with, but we'll leave it there. So, to talk about the actual
That's my
game,
local team you're talking about.
to talk about the game itself, Motherwell started very well. They started very well, and they set up in a system that works for them, a 4-3-3, I think it was off the beginning, which immediately gave them one more man in midfield compared to what we had with the two. I was very impressed with Motherwell, and it pains me to say it, and I don't like saying it, but I was very impressed with them, and I think their new manager coming in with a new idea, a new situation, new philosophy, and he's come in and implemented it, and you can't say much fairer than that. Like, it's early days, but they look good, and it was one of those things that I don't think we were particularly bad. I think we weren't great, but I think Motherwell deserve a huge amount of credit for the way that they played the game, because they set up how they've set up already, and they played through us on so many occasions.
Yeah, it felt like Motherwell set up very similarly to how Hearts have done in the games that things have gone better for us. The energy from the word go from Motherwell was there. For Hearts, not so much this week. And I don't know what caused it. I don't know if it's frustration lingering from the St Mirren result, which we haven't really touched on. But the less said about that result, the better. I think it was a typical bloody cup tie, wasn't it? Like just grindy and not a particularly pleasant experience. I don't like penalties. I hate penalty shootouts. I don't like winning them. I don't like losing them. But we're not talking about St Mirren. We'll gloss over that. So yeah, Hearts didn't jump out of the starting blocks looking all that energetic this week, and I feel like they kind of had to. They should have had a hell of a lot more about them early on, particularly with the system switch to the 4-2-4-4-2. Again, though, some of the actual selections and the personnel that were deployed in specific positions, I don't feel like we got it right, and it feels like we can't seem to get all of it right yet. And like you've kind of alluded to, that's quite concerning as we're almost at the end of August. Granted, we've had a far better August than we did last year. We have points, so that's always good. It's just not, for all the talk and for the early signs that we've seen from Hearts, I feel like we need to be doing better. We cannot allow situations like we were in at the weekend to recur. There are some teams in this division that if we go 3-0 down, we're more likely to end up 5 or 6-0 down by the end of the game than we are to come back. So we can't allow that to keep happening. Motherwell are a decent side for our level. They're by no means world beaters. We should be beating them at home. And that was obviously not going to happen after the three goals that they scored. They were essentially gifted by Hearts. Defensively, we were shambolic. We were all right going forward, but we were absolutely shambolic at the back. On all three goals, we gave them way too much space. They cut us open up the middle, which we've talked about the right hand side. They cut us open up the middle, and that is completely disgraceful. At Tynecastle, we should not be defending that poorly. We shouldn't be defending that poorly at all. It looked like a bunch of adults playing in a kids' play park with like 9-year-olds on that goal. I think it was the third goal. I think it was that they dinked through the middle. Yeah. It was like pure FIFA 99 shit. Unbelievable. So poor.
Yeah.
Absolutely infuriating. So we talk about the right hand side, and obviously it's a pretty embattled position. But the experienced heads that we have in the middle, at the back, that kind of shit should not be happening.
No, I agree, and I think.
And I've given I'll just finish this point here. I've given Xander Clark plenty of criticism, as you know. Like I do like him when he's good, but like I say, he's very much a confidence player. He wasn't to blame for any of these goals.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Very, very frustrating.
Yeah, no, and I think, like, talking about, you made a good point there about the difference between the two sides, and it to me it just felt like we were a team of strangers, and I've said that a few times. It just felt like we didn't know what we wanted to do, and missing passes and just giving cheap possession away. And Motherwell didn't need us to do that, because when they got it, they made things happen. Obviously, the first goal, and we're not going to go into too much depth in the goals. I think it's more, like I said to you before we started, I think it's more the reaction to the end result that I want to kind of touch on more. But the first goal is a deflected shot from Slattery. He's a player I really quite like, to be honest.
Yeah.
You're right, Xander Clark can't do anything with that. It goes in off of Steinvender, I believe it was. There's not a lot he can do there. The point that I'll make comes at halftime. Now, we spoke for probably a little bit longer than we usually do about the starting lineups and selections and stuff. Halftime comes, and we've made 2 substitutions at halftime. He brings Kabore off and James Wilson off, and he brings on Benny Beningame and Claudio Braga. Changes the system, goes to a back 3, 3-5-2 it looked as if it was, giving us an extra man in midfield in Benny. And we looked slightly better. We looked a bit more balanced in that midfield area, I felt. And Claudio Braga's energy was something that was instant. And obviously he grew into the game as it went on, and his impact was telling in the end. But and it was Joel Sked that wrote an article about it, about the number of halftime changes that we've made. I think it was 7 in the last 3 games in total. I think he made a triple sub in a previous game and a double sub on the opening day against Aberdeen, I think it might have been.
I think you're right, aye.
So that, to me, just adds into that theory of McInnes doesn't quite know the balance yet. He doesn't quite know the combinations yet. Like, you can speak about your strongest 11, but you also have to have partnerships on the pitch, and you have to find those partnerships. And I think we're still doing that, which is understandable when you see the number of changes that have been made in the summer. And I know it's that whole adage of you can't fix every problem in one window, but I think we're certainly trying to do that, which speaks volumes more about the state of our squad at the end of last season than it does about where we are now. But yeah, double change at halftime, system change at halftime. It's a big indication that Derek McInnes got it wrong in the first half.
Yes. Yeah, and he's admitted it in previous games. Now, my concern is the repetition of the pattern that's emerging. How much longer is it going to take to find a settled 11 in a settled system? When we were playing in pre-season and we were playing League Cup games, we were keeping things simple. And people seemed like they knew what they were being sent out there to do. I don't know where that's gone in the last couple of games, but we need to get back to that. It's been the same issue that we have crucified several managers in a row for. They start things simple. We see an upturn in results, and then they start trying to implement daft things here and there, trying to play around with the chemistry. And you can't do that. If you play around with chemistry too long, it's going to explode in your face. And that's what seems to be happening. And I hope that this isn't an indicator that it's going to get worse. We need to snap back to what we were doing before, which was keeping it simple. Lover of the 4-4-2 that I am, I must admit, it broke my heart to see how poorly we performed in the first half. If the 3-5-2 is going to be a system that works, then by all means use the 3-5-2. It looks like that is very much the formation that gets the most out of the talent that we have at the moment, or at least the talent that's being used at the moment. Noticeably much more settled and much more balanced in the second half, for sure. And of course there was one guy in particular who really upset the apple cart and sent a lot of Motherwell fans across the M8 rather frustrated by the end of the 90, I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely. I think Derek McInnes made a point at the end of the game where he spoke about too many individuals playing an individual game, and I think that kind of struck with me, because I was like, who's that pointed at? He's spoken about what he wants the team to do, but everybody has to buy into it. And are there players that aren't buying into it, or are we just seeing players that are just not capable of doing what is being asked of them? And if that is the case, then those players should be put on the sidelines, and players that are impressing should be given an opportunity. I think, people, again, that have listened to this know my thoughts on Alan Forrest, but I have to say the game against Motherwell, he was horrendous, and it hurts me to say that about Forrestinho, but he was very, very poor. Wasn't the only one, to be honest. I think as well as that, the press, that aggressive press, disappeared. McKenty was the only one that was pressing at points, and you don't need to be a genius to figure it out. If a one-man press is all you've got, Motherwell just play around it, and they did multiple times.
Yes.
If you're going to be a high-pressing, aggressive side, you need your team to do it. You can't just rely on one man, and that's a concern. But again, listen, we won't kind of dwell too much on the negatives, because the positives were not far away. Obviously, at halftime, I sat there going, it's 1-0. We've been outplayed. Chance to get in at halftime, regroup, change the shape, change the system, maybe make a sub, come out second half and have a go, or at least see a reaction to the first half. So Motherwell made it 2-0 after 50 minutes. Mash Wanise, a player that actually very impressed. I was very impressed with Motherwell, and I know I said that already, but they looked very good. Their play was purposeful, and they knew what they were doing. We certainly didn't. Another player that impressed me a lot from Motherwell was Elijah Just, the midfielder. He just seemed to be, nobody got anywhere near him. He finished the game with 2 assists. He got the assist for the third goal as well, scored by Longello. You touched on it. the one through ball pass just breaks our entire midfield in half, and that was a massive concern as well. But thankfully, the Longello goal
Two of
was
the, if I
scored.
can just butt in, Alan,
Of course you can.
two of their three goals were tap-ins, essentially tap-ins.
Well worked though.
Like I said earlier, we were absolutely calamitous at the back. That can't be allowed to continue. They really need to tighten things up. It was the same problem that we constantly talked about last year. And I think both of us have PTSD from having to talk about that so often last year. It was horrendous to watch. And I really fear the potential for this squad to slide back into that. I guess what we're about to get into now, though, is the other side of that and what the response was. So that's encouraging. But what I don't want to see is having to make up that deficit in the first place. Like the effort levels, the last half hour, that should be where we're at for the 90.
Yeah.
And we need to cut out the stupid nonsense at the back. We need to find a system that is a bit tighter, that isn't easy enough to. It's easier to cut through our central, midfield area than it is to cut through the block of butter in my fridge. Which frustrates me,
wrong.
Alan. I do not like refrigerated butter, but because of the annoying weather right now, this is a tangent that you weren't expecting, but the weather is frustrating me for many reasons. Many reasons. Chief among them, the fact that the butter has to be kept in the fridge because I love butter, as you can probably tell. Anyway, sorry, you were about to talk about the comeback.
Response, the reaction. Well, we had Harry Milne to thank. Obviously, the third Motherwell goal went
What
in.
a hit! What a hit!
Do you know? And it's funny.
Clean as hell.
It was something that Stephen Naismith mentioned on Sports Scene when I watched the highlights back, and he said, the difference between Harry Milne and James Penrice is that Harry Milne seems to get himself into more goal scoring positions. He seems much more aware of where he needs to be. And I'm not saying Penrice didn't, but Penrice came across as a sort of provider rather than a finisher.
Yes,
Harry Milne is certainly.
I think Milne is more of a marauder for sure. He's a bit more sort of free and easy going forward, and he's got the mentality and he's got the awareness and he has the fitness, key of all, to track back as well. He's able to do both. He's more of a complete wing back, it seems like. Whereas Penrice was a fantastic wing back who had a good delivery on him at times. But Milne's got that kind of the two packages in one kind of thing going on.
Yeah, and it was the finish. Just considering we're 3-0 down, the finish just seemed very controlled and almost like he was just hitting it and sort of thinking, do you know what? If it goes in, it goes in. We're back in the game. If it doesn't, well, at least I've had a shot. But it's got to be the cleanest struck rebound that I think I've ever seen. Because it was it was technically a rebound, but it was beautiful. Yeah, very, very good finish, and it got us back in the game and it gave us something to have a go at. It gave the fans that stayed something to celebrate, and there were a large number of fans that left at 3-0, which is something that I'll touch on later. But yeah, listen, a good goal gets us back in the game, but it's still that element for me when I watched it. I'm still sitting there thinking, where was this before? We've taken a chance, that's brilliant, but what's going to come next? Are Motherwell just going to get their foot on the ball and start playing it around again, and we're going to, the fizzle is going to kind of come out of us, but it didn't seem to. The opposite seemed to happen, and it was almost sort of like a rock up the arse for some of the players. And Claudio Braga, with 15 minutes to go, 74th minute, he's a live wire. Again, Stephen Naismith referred to him as a maverick on Sports Scene, and I think that kind of sums him up. I think Claudio Braga is fast becoming a very, very, very big fan favourite, and you and I have spoken about his celebration many a time. I'm starting to get on board with it. And his impact and his energy and even just his demeanour is so infectious. And the goal to get us to 3-2 was just a brilliant goal. He's a talent, isn't he?
For sure, yeah. Just to kind of spark that you need coming off the bench. I think where the conundrum sits is like, do we want to deploy him off the bench as a live wire in that kind of super sub capacity, or would we rather play him from the start and see how much of that we can get out of him every week? Because he is a very high energy player. He seems to have a lot of stamina as well. He's not a guy who's going to be blown out his arse an hour in. It looks like his fitness levels are fantastic.
Yeah. And
But
I was
it's a great weapon to have off the bench, like in situations like that. And you've talked about that on the podcast already this season, how Celtic and Rangers, to a slightly lesser extent, for years have exploited that, having that quality on the bench. And we finally do have that bit of quality, but is it coming at the expense of how we're able to set up to start games?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the chief conundrum that we're having to deal with at the moment.
Yeah, that's the point that I wanted to kind of segue into next. Like, Claudio Braga is a difference maker. You can see it. But there has to be that balance of he should be starting. Like, I'm sorry, he should be. And especially if you're talking about wanting to play off that last line of defence, which we did as the game went on, because I think Motherwell's high line, we kind of tired them a little bit when we started actually having a go, and you could see, right, you know what, there's a road back into us here, but we need to take it. And I think Braga was certainly the sort of chief orchestrator of that. He was just putting himself in areas and getting on the ball and making things happen and linking with his teammates as well. It's funny because obviously we didn't do an episode last week after the League Cup exit, or my predictions already in tatters for the season. So I went on strike last week. Claudio Braga obviously missing the decisive penalty in that game, went off the pitch in tears, spoke after the game about just being gutted and, disappointed in himself and letting people down, etc. And he strikes me as a very emotional kind of player, a very emotionally driven player. I've seen a lot of his interviews about like his family and how buzzing they are for him coming to the Scottish football and just the impact that it has on his life. And I think that in all of that adds to the personality that I just very much am warming to with Braga. And I think for anybody to have that difference, to be that difference maker, for it to be him, there was some sort of nice kind of poetic justice to it. That he obviously has a disappointing game against St Mirren, misses the crucial moment, bounces back today, and basically well, I was about to say wins us the game, but I mean, he could have done at the end. But yeah, it was just a very, very nice feeling, and I felt like it couldn't have happened to anybody more deserving than Braga.
Absolutely, yeah. He had a shiter against St Mirren. It happens to the best. You're not going to be a 10 out of 10 every week. What he did that was, I think, noteworthy is he held himself to account, and he used that and turned it into a fantastic performance the next time out. He didn't play with his head down. He didn't look like he lacked in energy. He didn't look like he would rather be anywhere else, like some players have in the last couple of years at Hearts after a bad result or a poor performance. He went out there and he played with a bit between his teeth and played with more energy than we've seen from him so far, to prove himself and to show that he's, it's almost like he's telling the Heart support, that wasn't Claudio Braga that you saw last week. That was me on an off day. This is what you're going to get more of. If he can keep up the standard that he set this weekend, I think he's going to be doing all right. And, too much pressure and too much blame is put on people who miss decisive penalties. We always forget that we should never be in that situation in the first place. If anyone has missed the decisive penalty, it's because the entire group has failed to do the job before that. So Claudio Braga needs to be less harsh on himself, I think. But yeah, you're absolutely right. He's very emotional, but he's holding himself to account, and it's great to see because he's not like a baby, but he's not like an old experienced player either. So he's got a good head on his shoulders, I think. He's got that bit of cockiness, but he's backing it up so far.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He'll be all right. And he saved their arses at the weekend.
Massively. And I think the goal, the second goal that I'll just kind of mention just briefly again there, obviously we've spoken about VAR checks previously. That one took a little bit of time, but the correct decision was reached. John Beaton, the referee, which gave me the fear. When I saw VAR, I thought he's going to find a way to rule this out, but thankfully the little lines were drawn on the pitch and Claudio Braga held his run perfectly and got a good finish off. Then, obviously, we had the goal to draw us level at 3 each. It was, I don't want to say well worked, because I don't think we really worked anything well during the game, but it was a good bit of play, and it summed up what the players involved are good at. Benny had the ball in his possession. He shielded it from a couple of Motherwell challenges. He managed to feed it out to, I think it was Milne, maybe. And then
Love Benny.
There's a shot from Harry Milne again. Goalkeeper spills it, and Claudio Braga is there again on the last line of the defence. He's up against the last defender. He just puts himself in a position to potentially take advantage of any spills from the goalkeeper, and thankfully that's exactly what happens, and Braga pokes it home. So
it makes you wonder, Alan. Sorry to butt in again. I'm butting in a lot this week.
Right.
If Kabori had been started in his natural position, which is up front, makes you wonder how much of that we might have seen from him earlier on in the game, because he's got the same instinct that Braga has. He scored 22 goals last year. It feels like if we can get the right people in the right positions, and especially up front, we could see a lot more of that happening rather than the frustration. And it's just it's annoying as hell to kind of almost have a complete squad in our hands and say we almost have it. That formula is just almost perfect. We just are missing like the tiniest ingredient that would make us a settled side. So
I think this is the thing, though. I think I saw, sorry to kind of jump on that, but I saw quite a lot of people being not critical of Kabore, but not going as close as to writing him off, because I think you can't really write him off when he's played in a position that isn't where he should be. But I think bringing him off was the right thing to do. I think he's definitely somebody that has potential, but the step up is something that needs to be remembered as well. A lot of these players that we've brought in, it is a step up from where they've come from before. So that in itself is something that will take time, and obviously they'll face another challenge in next weekend's game, or this coming weekend's game against Livingston, when different surface, etc. So yeah, I don't. Kabore didn't impress me all that much, but I'm willing to let it go. I'm willing to give him an opportunity to impress me when he's played in a position where he should be, because I think, considering how many changes and how many tactical tweaks Derek McInnes has made, it won't be long before we see Kabore where he should be playing. And I think this is the thing as well, we've kind of gone a bit full circle on it, but I think Derek McInnes said at the end of the game, maybe I should just start my strongest 11 instead of having to turn to the bench all the time. I think if that doesn't scream out that a player doesn't, or a manager that doesn't know what his strongest 11 is, that statement alone is enough to suggest that. But to be fair, he's got a squad of about 50 players, so I don't blame him for not knowing his best 11. He might have...
There is that aspect as well. He could easily settle on a player and say, right, you're going to be playing for me, and then we get an offer for that guy by the deadline and he's gone. It's like that, There's part of me that thinks that maybe we're not going to know until after the start of September, because we don't know who's going to be here in 10 days' time or in 7 days' time.
Totally.
It's going to be difficult to really nail it down until we know who's going to be here long term.
Agreed.
Especially with the Jamestown system of if we get a decent offer, they will go.
Of course, yeah, and that's. But this is the whole thing, and to sort of round off the game, and this is what the most sort of bizarre point for me, and you mentioned it as well at the start when we were talking about it. You could make a justifiable case that we should have won that game. We had two big chances in the last 5 minutes, both again from Claudio Braga. The first one, Kizaridis played him through. And Kizaridis is a player I want to see more of, but again, I can understand that holding him off, putting him on the bench and giving him the last 10-15 minutes to run at people. But there will come a point when he comes in and is used from the start, because he's impressed so far. He played a lovely through ball for Braga, who attempted to sort of chip over the goalkeeper, and the keeper gets a hand to it. And then there was a long range shot from Braga, and the goalkeeper makes a phenomenal save, tips it onto the post.
Fantastic goalkeeping has robbed us there. He was outstanding, to be fair.
And Yeah, but that's my thing, and that's kind of where I want to leave the Motherwell game, in the sense that it wasn't good because we were 3-0 down. And like you said previously, you don't want to be in a position where you're 3-0 down at home against anyone. Realistically, that's not what we need. But to have that desire and energy and character to bounce back and say, we're not out of this game. It gets to 3-1. Nah, we're not out of this game. It gets to 3-2. We're not out of this game. We're very much back in the game. Gets to 3-all, and you're thinking, we're potentially going to get a draw from a game that we were 3-0 down in half an hour ago. Like, that's a positive.
But the mentality from the players at the time seemed like it was, we can go on and win this. Whereas a lot of sides would quite justifiably say, right, we've earned a point the way we look dead in the water here. And
Quite a lot of
shot up shot, but yeah.
Quite a lot of Hearts sides of old wouldn't have had anywhere near the resolve to come back and get that result. So, you have to give some credit where credit is due for that. And I think it certainly made Derek McInnes's post-match interview a lot easier for him to come out and speak about the game. But yeah, let's just not wait till we're 3-0 down to actually react. We've come from behind again. We did it in a previous game. We've done it again against Motherwell. So that shows some form of mental resolve to that particular outcome. But catching our breath after that, we now sit on 7 points from our opening 3 fixtures. And like you touched on it earlier, it took us quite a while to get 7 points last season. So for all the disappointment, and you and I spoke about it on the last episode that we did about the fact that we've not actually played all that well yet. We didn't play all that well against Motherwell, but Motherwell played very well, and we didn't. That's on us. But like you say, and I will agree with you, shock horror, I don't feel like we're far away. I feel like in the cold light of day, there are certain points from the Motherwell game that you can look at and say, don't do that again. Don't do that again. But it's simple things. We're not a complete disaster. There are things that need to be worked on, and Derek McInnes will need to do a little bit more, I think, to convince those that didn't want him or are maybe still not convinced.
Yeah.
Because results like that first 65 minutes will give people the ammunition to say, well, you wanted Derek McInnes, this is what we've got. 3-0 down at home against Motherwell. But then in that last half an hour, you can say, well, this is actually what we've got. This is that reaction and response. But it's, I felt disappointed after the Motherwell game. I'm not going to lie to you. And it wasn't because I felt like, we're 3-0 down, that was shite. I'm disappointed because we had chances at the end to win that game. And that would have just been absolute scenes if we managed to.
You would have enjoyed that one, Alan, especially considering the opposition.
I would have had the flags out. But I think this is the thing, and this is kind of where I'll leave it in terms of Motherwell. We can't allow ourselves to get into that situation again. This cannot be a regular thing.
Agreed.
Lessons have to be learned. The players that Derek McInnes made those thinly veiled remarks at, i.e. a bunch of individuals playing an individual game, maybe I should just start my best 11 rather than having to turn to the bench all the time. If those are not marked remarks aimed at certain players, they'll know who they are. They'll be sitting in the dressing room. They will know who they are. And I think
we will as well. Yeah. Next week when we play Livingston, we're going to know who they are because it's likely that they won't start. And some of them might be surprising names to some. I think that might be a message that McInnes might send. We talked about it when he was hired. He's not a guy who's going to take any shit. He's not a sentimental person. If he feels that someone is not performing their role in the team, he won't play them. Yeah, totally. It's as simple as that. And he's got enough people waiting in line to take over. He's got a 50-man squad or whatever it was you were talking about earlier. He's got plenty of players, chomping at the bit to get some minutes. So he doesn't have to. So it's going to be very interesting to see the team selection against Livy.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, to kind of go into that Livingston game, I think Livingston, obviously, they got beat 3-0 by Celtic at the weekend. They lost in the League Cup to Hibs. Prior to that, they beat Falkirk 3-1 at home. The Tony Macaroni Arena is back, and I'm very much here for it. I think
it's a ridiculous name.
This is brilliant though. The spaghetti.
It's not as
ad
bad.
and
What
all,
was
all the
it? What
things.
was it that what was it that New Douglas Park was called for it? Was it called the Fountain of Youth Stadium or something like that? Was that
Yeah.
Was it
Oh
New Douglas Park? It was
God.
called that, or
Yeah,
was
yeah,
it
yeah.
Broadwood?
I think no, I think it was
The
New Douglas
Fountain of
Park. I
Youth
think you're right.
Stadium.
The Fountain
Yeah.
of Youth Stadium. I mean, do you know what? Fair play. But the Tony Macaroni
Uh,
Arena, the spaghetti had is the other name that
it's
I
not
very
even
much
an
enjoy.
arena. Oh, like
But do you know what? There's part of me talking about Livingston, etc. I I think they'll do quite well this season. I think they might surprise a few people. And I hope it's not us. I hope it doesn't start with us. But like you said, team selection will be important. It will be a big indicator of the situation and the current setup that we have. I believe that we will see a reaction. I think, Derek McInnes was highlighted in the media prior to the Motherwell game. He was asked about has the bubble burst after the loss against St Mirren, and we're going to see a lot of that this season. I think people need
was
to
it
people need
wasn't a
to
loss. It was a draw. We drew with St Mirren.
but people
It's not a
have to.
loss. We lost on
This
penalties.
this is a point that I'll make before I kind of give you my Livingston prediction. I think a lot of people are going to have to be very wary of the media this season. I think with Tony Bloom's
Yes.
comments and with the way that Hearts are being perceived, the media will be ramping it up every time something doesn't go for us. And we saw it against St Mirren. We didn't do an episode last week due to just timing difficulties to get one done, but every little slip up, every little bump in the road, it will be amplified by the media because that's what they do. And we saw it after the Motherwell game. But the flip side was the media couldn't help but say the resolve and the reaction and the mentality that Hearts showed is a big plus. We have to roll with that into Livingston. We have to take the positive momentum that coming from 3-0 down to get a point brings us, because Livingston won't make it easy either. They're not a bad side, and Martindale is a seasoned manager that knows his way around, knows his players, and works well with them. And obviously, there's quite a few former Hearts connections in the Livingston side as well. So there is that as a sort of B side to the story as well.
Yep, it's a tough environment as well. The pitch at Tony Macaroni Arena is not the best pitch. It's not conducive to nice football. It's a death trap for injury-prone legs. So I will be in constant fear for Benny if he's playing. It's one of those pitches that's just not great quality. So anything could happen. Really,
But that's also my point I wanted to say, and I kind of touched on it earlier about the number of new players having new experiences coming to Hearts. Going to Livingston, playing in the Tony Macaroni Arena, the grandest stage of them all, it will be a change for a lot of our new players.
Yes.
They won't have seen that before. This is a different environment, a different surface, a difficult surface, like you mentioned. These are the sort of games that we will learn about our new players and what they've got. And I'm encouraged by what I've seen from a lot of our new players. I just hope against Livingston that we don't start sluggishly and we don't start poorly. I hope that we go out with that energy and with that bit between our teeth, because I think we'll need that. What would you, before we wrap up, what's your prediction?
I think there's going to be changes, and I think there's going to be some changes that might come as a surprise to supporters, people who aren't in the know and don't take the bollockings from the boss in the dressing room. I do expect a reaction. I think 2-0 is probably what I'll go with. I don't remember the last time I accurately predicted a result though. So anything that gives us 3 points I will be happy with, but I'll go for a 2-0 result. I'm going to say a Braga brace. I think he starts at the weekend and he's going to score twice.
Perfect.
He's got the confidence, he's got the momentum after that performance at the weekend. I think we'll see more of the same.
Hope he just doesn't roll his ankle when he does his Sue celebration and lands on the Lego pitch at Livingston. My prediction.
Yeah, if I didn't hate the Sue before, I will hate it then. That's for sure.
My prediction for the game against Livingston is going to be Livingston 1, Heart of Midlothian 3. I think we'll see a response. I think we have to I think it'll be a tough game though. I think Livingston will fancy
Yeah.
their chances. Just watch Motherwell. I know it's just night and day from how the two teams play, but there are vulnerabilities in our side, and we need to shut those down quick. I do think they'll get a goal, but I think we'll get 3. Yeah, that's my thoughts there. I would give you goal scorers. I'm going to throw a Kabori in there because I want him to get his first goal. I want him to get off the mark properly, and kick on, and hopefully we see that from him. But we'll wrap it up there, folks. If there are any points that you wanted to make or any comments on the Motherwell game, as I said at the start, please feel free to let us know your comments in the description, in the comment section down below. John just briefly flashed it up on the screen there, so I'll just touch on it. I next year will be running the Edinburgh Marathon, the Edinburgh Half Marathon next year, 2026. I will be running in aid of Big Hearts, so there is a fundraising link that is live. I will share it on my socials when the podcast goes live. Don't feel under any pressure to sponsor or donate, because any sponsors, any donations are massively appreciated. But it is a little bit further down the road. I'm currently in a training program to kind of get myself up there. I feel like I'm in rehab at the moment. But yeah, it's the sponsor, the fundraising.
Oh
page
God,
is live,
I miss rehab.
Well, as I say, folks, the fundraising page is live, and I will share it across the socials. So if you would be so kind as to throw a couple of quid my way, it's all going to Big Hearts and the work that they do in the local community. Obviously, as Hearts fans, we're all well aware of what their contributions are to local families around the Gorgie area. But yes, please do, if you have any spare change, chuck them in the foundation link and the fundraising link, rather. And yeah, any support is massively appreciated. If you are heading to the Spaghetti Had at the weekend to back the boys in maroon, give it everything. I say it every week, but the players clearly appreciate the contribution of fans. You could see it at Tynecastle against Motherwell. There was a real drive there from both the stands and the pitch, and it made a massive difference. Players have acknowledged it, how important the fans' voices are. So go along and just give it loudly, because we need it. Currently, as I said, 7 points from our opening 3 fixtures. It's not a bad start, and like I will end this week's episode in a similar note to I ended last week. It'll be very, very interesting to see where we are when we start playing well. That's where I'm going to leave it there, folks. But like I said, any thoughts, any comments, let us know. Reach out to us on the socials. You can find us across all of them. So yeah, take care, and yeah, have a good one. Take a breath, folks. Take a breath. Bye for now.